Amongst my many habits is my casual interest in etymology. I've always found it interesting seeing how a word acquired its modern meaning and seeing its evolution over the decades and centuries. A relatively new word, less than a century old, with a rather dark but amusing beginning is the term Molotov cocktail. If you're a native English speaker, you've probably heard this term before. If not, allow me to enlighten you. It is simply a glass bottle filled with gasoline with a rag sticking out of its top. You then light the rag on fire and throw the bottle at whatever you're hoping to burn down. It's every budding arsonist and rebel's go-to weapon in a pinch. And if you're at all like me, you probably wondered how this homemade weapon gained such an odd name. And to understand that, we have to go back to 1939 Finland. At this point in history, Finland was in an unfavorable geographic position, with an expansionist Soviet Union sitting along its entire eastern border. The Finnish at this point were acutely aware it was only a matter of time before the Soviet Union attempted to invade their country, which finally happened November 30th, 1939, beginning the Winter War. Importantly for the story I'm telling, this conflict was to be managed by the Soviets with as much public relations tact as humanly possible. Global public opinion is an unignorable reality at this point, and the Soviets were acutely aware that a war of aggression against a much smaller nation was a bad PR move, especially for a country hoping to extol the virtues of a new communist society. So when the Soviets invaded and began bombing Helsinki and other Finnish settlements, it was up to the Soviet foreign minister, Vyacheslav Molotov, to put a nice humanitarian spin on the Soviet invasion to the worldwide press. He would inform foreign media outlets that reports of Soviet bombings were simply ridiculous, and that the objects dropped out of their airplanes were food parcels meant to help the starving Finnish population. Needless to say, absolutely no one in Finland believed this, and the Finnish would mockingly dub these Soviet bombs Molotov breadbaskets. Luckily for the Finnish, it was discovered during the Spanish Civil War that Soviet tanks were flawed. Their tank engines were prone to overheat, making them susceptible to fire-based attacks. The Spanish nationalists would use this information to create the first modern Molotov cocktails, using these weapons to great effect against the Republican-aligned Soviet tanks. It didn't take long for the Finnish army to copy the Spanish nationalists and utilize the same weapon against the Soviet tanks now invading their country. The weapon was mass-produced and again used to great effect against Soviet armor. As the Soviets continued to drop Molotov breadbaskets all across their country, it didn't take long for the Finnish servicemen to continue this humorous naming convention and dub their handy new anti-tank weapons Molotov cocktails. News of this humorously named weapon eventually reached the ears of the journalists reporting on the Winter War, and before long, news of this uniquely named weapon spread around the world, permanently cementing its now widely known name. And there you have it, the story of an unusual name for an unusual weapon. So please remember, if you're ever in the unfortunate situation of fighting an armored enemy and lacking a good anti-tank weapon, look no further than your living room curtains and liquor cabinet.